So, audience analysis. Who are your readers? Part of deciding how to put together your document, you must consider your audience. And you may have multiple possible audiences. You may have a primary audience, secondary audience, and tertiary audience. Tertiary just means third level. Your primary readers are the main readers, those who will use the document for very specific or functional reasons. As a student, your primary reader of your essays is your professor. Once you're in the workforce, determining your primary reader may be more difficult. If it's a report about a project, the primary reader may be your boss or a client. If you've created a brochure on sexually transmitted infections, STIs, for university students, then your primary readers are those students. Your secondary readers are those people who are still required to read the document, but for different, less urgent reasons. So your essay may be read by your fellow students, for example, as part of a peer review process. A project report may be read by other members of your company or the client's company. The STI brochure may be read by professors or parents or high school students, as well as the university students at whom the brochure is aimed. Finally, your tertiary or your third level readers are those who may have some contact with the document for, various kinds of reasons. For your essay, perhaps it's used as an example of student work in an accreditation review. A report could be used as part of annual reviews, or parts of it may be used in developing proposals for other projects. The STI brochure could be used by nurses or other health professionals. So these are the three levels of readers who may use your document in some way. But, as always, it's much more complex than this. There is more to analyzing your audience. In the workplace, you need to remember that your document may need to move past several readers, not all of whom may use your document. For example, the first person to see your document, the initial reader, may only be the person to decide where your document goes, such as a receptionist. So you need to organize your document to make sure that the initial reader knows what your document is about and who should get it. Another reader may be the gatekeeper, the person who decides whether or not the document should move up the ladder. Since a person can be in two audiences, the initial reader and the gatekeeper could in fact be the same person. Then you have your primary and secondary readers. As we've just discussed, your primary reader is your main audience, the one who will make the decisions about the document. The secondary reader could be the person who supports the primary reader in the decisions or may implement what is in your document. Finally, we have the watchdog. This is the person who may say that your project proposal is too expensive to implement or that it's too politically sensitive. So even if your report or document makes it all the way up the ladder to the decision makers, the watchdog, who could be, for example, the chief financial officer, may nix your project because it's too expensive. So as you create your document, keep these various readers in mind. You don't want your document to be stopped at the receptionist's desk because it's addressed incorrectly or nixed at the end because there's a problem with the numbers. Be diligent and make sure that you have anticipated any problems and addressed them before you send it on. As you analyze your audience, you also need to consider each member of that audience as an individual, as a member of an organization, and as a member of a larger demographic type of group. Every organization has its own culture and its own way of communicating, its own discourse. In this respect, you need to be aware that the culture and style of the organization in which your audience is a part. Think here of those Microsoft versus Apple advertisements with the two young men, one who's cool and, in jeans, and the other one who seems geeky in the suit. What image does Microsoft conjure? One that is business-oriented and straight-laced. What about Apple? Is it fun-loving, young, and hip? In addition, your audience is also part of a group in terms of demographics. They're a member of a class, a socioeconomic class, an ethnicity, and so on. They are also part of a group in terms of psychographics, so personality, attitudes, lifestyles, values, and so on. All of these things need to be considered. Once you come up with a sense of where your audience comes from, you can, once again, try and anticipate how your audience will react to your document. This will help you as you write your document because it will help you to shape the content and determine what to include and how to focus your argument. So, as you're considering your audience when you're creating any document, you're trying to anticipate how your audience will respond to what you're saying. So start by considering the audience's initial reaction. Will your audience see your message as important? Does it matter more to you, or does it matter more to your audience? What is the audience's experience with you? Do they have a positive history with you or a negative one? This history will shape their initial response even before the person starts reading. Next, anticipate what information is needed. This knowledge will help you to determine how much background information you need to provide and how many details you must include. Ask yourself, what does the audience already know? Does the audience have first-hand knowledge? What does your audience need to know to appreciate your points? Third, you should try to anticipate what obstacles you will encounter. Is your audience opposed to your message even before you submit the document? How can you convince your reader that your information or argument is persuasive? You also need to consider how easy it will be to do as you ask. What will it take to implement your ideas or recommendations? Anticipate what problems might occur in the implementation or what questions will be asked, and answer those questions before they are asked. Fourth, consider the positives. What are the benefits for the audience? Emphasize those things that will demonstrate those benefits. You can also consider what you have in common with them. Do you have similar experiences, interests, goals, values, and so on? Fifth, try to determine what your audience is expecting. What writing style will the audience prefer? For this, you may need to think about corporate culture and the nature of the business. The style for a bank will be very different from that needed for a fashion company, for example. Are there red flag words? Red flag words are those words that will immediately conjure up a negative image or cause a negative reaction. Anything that might appear to be racist or sexist are easy examples of this, but some words and phrases are more subtle and can announce your bias and political slant. For example, what do you call someone who cares about providing breakfast programs in the schools? Is that person a communist, a socialist, or someone just concerned about social welfare? How much detail does the audience want? If the readers are already very familiar with the context and facts related to your project or document, then there may not be the same need to provide lots of detail as if you're pitching a new project to someone you've never worked with before. Similarly, if you were creating that STI brochure we mentioned earlier, the level of detail is different for high school students than for nursing students or for those working in the healthcare field. Does your audience want a direct structure or an indirect structure? The type of structure you choose will likely depend on whether your message is a good news or a bad news one. If you are delivering a message that is positive, and if your audience is likely to agree with you, then the direct structure that gets to the point is a good one. On the other hand, use an indirect structure to deliver bad news, or if your audience will need much persuading. In this case, you would build your argument with persuasive details and then end with your final conclusion, which could be something negative like cuts need to be made or people need to be laid off. Does your audience have expectations about the length of your document, about the use of visuals or footnotes? Here you need again to consider the culture of the organization as well as the nature of the project you are doing. It's hard to put a specific length to a project report because you need to provide all the important information, but you don't want to ramble on or include extraneous details, things that aren't important. Visuals are usually good to include in reports, but only if they convey important information. You shouldn't be including images just to make it pretty. Visuals should be used to provide information in a manner that makes it easier for the reader to understand. So maybe it's understanding numbers or the interconnections between ideas and so on. You should always give credit to sources of information that you use, whether it's in a footnote or in a reference list or in text citations. The style that you use will depend on the field in which you are working. When in doubt, ask or look at previous reports. That's a quick and easy way to do it too. Finally, consider how the document will be used. Under what physical conditions will the audience use the document? If it is a report that will be used on a construction site, how does that change your format and the media that you use? If it will be used in an office setting with few distractions, does that change your design and layout? What purpose will the document serve? Will it be a reference or a guide that will be referred to over a number of years? Or is it the basis of a lawsuit? Does that change their format? Will the document be kept on file and referred to regularly, or just once in a while? Will the document be publicly displayed? Our STI brochure, for example, may be displayed on a rack in the Health Services Office. A corporation's annual report will often be widely circulated and often online. But an internal review of the misuse of office supplies will probably be kept on file and used to make changes internally. Finally, once you've thought about all these things, you need to determine how you will put together the document and what to include. Part of this means thinking about who will use the document, right, your audience, which we've just discussed. Is your audience composed of experts, informed persons, or lay persons? That will help you to decide what level of technicality those people will need and what information they need. An expert, for example, is someone who is well informed, so would just need the facts and figures without any real interpretation. They would have the expertise to make their own interpretations. An informed person would be someone who has a strong background in the field, so can understand the facts and figures with some explanation, but it's okay to use the terminology of the field. A lay person would be like a patient who has just been diagnosed with an STI, for example. They will want the facts and figures, but they need them explained in simple and straightforward terms. As you can see from the details outlined in this video, it's important to take some time up front to examine the rhetorical situation, purpose of your document, and your audience. As you consider the rhetorical elements, focus on your audience and purpose. Try to consider the subtleties of your audience, not just the surface layer. The more you know up front, the better able you will be to tailor your document and to improve your ability to persuade your audience.